Hour number 2 on a Tuesday. Chris Brown, Steve Tasker with you. And you know football is getting close when this guy shows up on our show. NFL Film senior producer, co-host of ESPN's NFL Matchup Show, and everybody's favorite film evaluator, Greg Cosell, back for another season. How we doing, Greg? How's your summer been?
My summer's been good, Brownie. You know, it's getting to be that time of year. You know, we've started these preseason games, which I know that everybody has to make a final evaluation on every play and to determine a guy's career based on every single play. That's where we are in the preseason.
Yeah, and we got a first look all around the league. The Bills taking on the Giants here in Buffalo on a smoking hot day. Which always catches us off guard a little bit from where we leave off the season usually, but nevertheless, Genny, I know you've seen some of this. Give us, off the top of your head, give us your impressions of maybe some of the younger players that the Bills brought in.
Yeah, I watched. The guys I watched were Sanders and Walker, the D tackles. I watched Hancock, the rookie safety, who, by the way, I really like that kid. I liked his tape a lot at Ohio State. I thought he was a really versatile player, which is the way he was kind of used in that game. I don't know what the status of the other safeties are with injuries, but I thought he was a really interesting player. Those are the guys I really took a look at in detail. I tell you who I like, and you guys can tell me. I'm not there if he's had a good training camp. But how has the rookie corner Strong been in training camp? Because I really liked his tape in college, and I think he's got really good corner traits.
Yeah, he's done well. I would say his second week of training camp was probably his best stretch. Had an interception and a pass breakup over the course of the week, and he's rotated up for more reps with Hairston being out with the sprained LCL. So he's got higher quality reps against conceivably better competition. So, and, as you know, the Bills love length at cornerback, and he has that, at 6'1", 195, and he's got long arms.
Yeah, no, and he's, he played a ton of press in college at Virginia Tech, and he's a very, very good press man corner. I think he can play press bail as well. I guess the issue for a lot of guys like that, Brownie, and we talked about this with Ka'ir Elam, who's obviously no longer with the Bills, is the issue for guys that play so much press in college is to really understand the subtleties and nuances and details of playing zone, because zone is a much different animal than playing press.
Yeah. What did you think of Hancock's day against the Giants?
I liked it. I like the way he plays. I think he's an aggressive player. The play that actually stood out to me, they used him 3 or 4 times as a blitzer, obviously, but I really thought that the play that stood out to me was a play he didn't make. But I think it was the second play of the third quarter where he showed some physicality running the alley from the back end in the run game and really took on a block with some force. Now, as I said, he didn't make the play. But I just think that there's an aggressiveness to him. There's a tenacity to him. There's a competitive toughness to him. And I think that there's a versatility to him. He can play on the back end. He can play in the box. He's physical. I think he can even play post safety at times. Again, he's a later round pick, so you never know how all that plays out. I know. Is Cole Bishop, is he still injured, or did he just not play in this game?
He's working his way back. He's got a quad injury, and he's missed over a week of action. So, yeah, it's part of the reason Hancock got pressed into action. Cam Lewis started the game with Damar Hamlin, and then Hancock came in after. He looked very
good, too, by the way. Cam Lewis looked great in that game, for whatever it's worth, the preseason game. But I love the way he also played downhill in the run game. He made a number of tackles with physicality and toughness. But then again, last year when he played, I thought he was a really nice sort of piece, because obviously he wasn't a true starter. But when he plays, he shows up.
Yeah, and what's interesting is Cam as well as Hancock are being cross-trained. Well, Lewis has already done it, playing nickel and safety, but they have Hancock playing nickel and safety too. And they said there's a timetable on Hancock, so there might be a time where they just hone in on one position for him, but for now, he's still handling two.
What do you think about Hancock as a nickel?
He played some in college. It wouldn't be new to him. He did that before. It's not brand new. Obviously, playing in the NFL is a whole new experience. My guess is over time that he'd be able to do it. As Brownie suggested, they're working with him. There's a timetable. I don't know when they'd feel comfortable with him in that role. It's obviously a team that plays a high percentage of nickel, with Dorian Johnson being a really good nickel, not only from a coverage perspective, but from a run defense perspective, which is really important for this defense. Because there are times, depending on your front, where the nickel has a B gap responsibility in the run game. So, that's an inside gap, as you know, Steve. So, Johnson can handle that. He's done that for the last number of years. You have to be able to do that to play nickel in this defense.
Yeah. You mentioned you watched Sanders and Walker.
Yeah.
Sanders is a guy that we've seen in camp already. You want to talk about winning early in the down. Sometimes he beats guards before they're out of their stance. What
Yes.
did you see from him in this game in particular?
He did that in this game as well. I mean, he was the one that got to Dart, obviously, on the touchdown to Humphrey, but you saw that right there. That's what he was in college. I mean, I loved him coming out, and I thought he was more of a pass rusher at this point in his development than a run player, but I think that he has the ability to do that. The quickness, and he plays low. It was really interesting, Brownie, watching because obviously Sanders and Walker played almost all their snaps together, if memory serves me correctly. And I have to tell you that Sanders plays really low. He's so quick off the ball. He's got quick hands and feet. He plays off contact really, really well, whereas Walker this was the concern. It's the reason he was a 4th-round pick and not a higher pick is he has a big tendency to play too high. And that's just hard to fix. I mean, I'm not a coach, and I'm not going to sit here and say he can never play in the league. I would never say that about any rookie. I don't do that because I just don't talk like that. You never know how things go from here on. But that tendency to play too high, you lose all your power and you lose all your initial quickness. So that's something I assume that they're working on because for a man that big, he's a really good athlete.
And also there was a guy who got his career off to a hard start last year, Dwayne Carter. He had the wrist injury last year. It took him a while to get back. He is also back in there. We've seen during training camp Dwayne Carter and TJ Sanders and, of course, a little bit of Walker. These guys are flashing once in a while. What are your thoughts on Carter, if any?
Yeah, Carter to me, watching him come out of Duke, he struck me as a solid rotational type player, Steve. Not a full-time starter that you'd put out there for 60 snaps, which they, obviously on the Bills, the way they're constructed, he wouldn't be doing that anyway. But he struck me, no matter where he would play, as a rotational player. And be a solid guy, probably not a true pass rusher, but just one of those guys that I think every defensive line needs to have, just one of those solid professional type players. That's the way he struck me.
Mm-hmm. All right, so offensive side of the ball, Tyrell Shavers is now in his 4th season with the Bills. 3 of them have been on the practice squad, although he got called up for a few games last year, scored his first NFL touchdown, and it's interesting that he offers some different kinds of skills to the receiving corps that they don't have in great numbers. I guess I'm getting at the size element here because it's Keon Coleman, and a bunch of guys, that are 6 foot and under. And Shavers is a legit 6'4", and we see him turn in a big play at the end of the half. But I think he's sharpened up his route running and his releases off the line this year. He looks even more consistent with that part of his game this year.
Yeah, well, it's funny you mentioned that. Obviously, he has size and he has stride length, which certainly becomes a factor when he has free access, which he had on that 58-yard reception that you mentioned. And he actually ran a good route. That was a deep post, but I'm sure you recall he used his vertical release to stem outside, and he got the corner turned, and then he redirected inside with some juice. There was also another play, which was an incompletion. It was actually a quick hitch. I think it was on the left side of the field where I thought he did a really good job of getting off the line versus press. And I thought he showed some natural quickness for a man that size. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I would assume Brownie, I don't know this, I don't study it. Does he plays on special teams, right?
Yes, he does.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I assume, if he's a good special teams player and he can continue to show as a receiver, I mean, if the season were to start, truly start tomorrow, what the receivers would be, it would be Coleman, it would be Shakir, it would be Palmer.
Yep.
Would it be Curtis Samuel?
Samuel Moore.
If he's healthy, or Elijah Moore.
Interesting. So Shavers, I mean, he would have a little bit of an uphill battle, but it depends on how much of a core special teams player he is.
And that's also, too, you got another wide receiver as a core special teamer, as a return guy, Viscus Chenald. What are your thoughts?
I got to tell you, I guess I was wrong on him. I did him 2 years coming out of Colorado, and I really liked his tape. Now, again, I guess teams didn't see him as a quote-unquote true pure receiver because they've never really lined him up that way. I shouldn't say never. That's too strong a word. But it seems like everybody, trying to deal with him as a kind of almost a gimmick kind of guy, like move him around. But I really liked him coming out. Maybe I'll turn out to be wrong. Up to this point, I certainly am. But he's big. He's physical. He's got some juice to him. I mean, we're not talking about a guy that doesn't have traits.
Yeah, and I just was interested because he's been relatively quiet in training camp. Now, he missed the first few days because he was on, I can't even remember, non-football injury or PUP, one of those. So he missed the first few days and didn't really flash at all in the first 2 weeks of camp. Then we get to this first preseason game. He's used on kick return, punt return, punt coverage as a gunner, 2-point conversion attempt, and then he's utilized on offense as a receiver. It was very interesting to see him used in the number of ways that they choose to deploy him in preseason game number 1, despite missing 3 or 4 days at the start of camp.
Yeah, and that's sort of been his whole career up to this point, is he's never really been used as a receiver, almost exclusively as a receiver. He's been used in so many other ways. And I guess that's the way the league saw him because he just hasn't been used that way. So, but I really liked his tape coming out. Obviously, even if he does make the team, it's not as if he's going to be a top 3 receiver within this group. So, we'll see what would happen. But if they see him as a return guy, and if he's really good as a gunner in coverage, then he has a chance to make it, as a core special teams player.
And it could be that he's such a versatile athlete. I mean, a return guy, a coverage guy, a wide receiver, slot guy, what have you. The problem is, where are you going to give him most of his snaps? And if you start giving him snaps in one spot, the other 4 spots suffer because of it. Brownie and I even had the conversation as he might be, and I put in finger quotes, he might be a gamer. He has not flashed in practice.
Right.
But you notice him in the game.
In the games, the guy's everywhere. So he might be one of those guys that you never really get a sense of what he can do until they call on him in a game. I don't know what that is, but his versatility seems to be his greatest asset.
Yeah, and it's almost, a player like that in his NFL career has been Cordero Patterson. And, who's always seems, he's going to play 10, 12 years in the league, and he's had good moments. But, maybe Shenault is going to turn out to be one of those guys. The problem with those guys is you have to really have a sense of exactly how you're going to deploy them, because otherwise they don't make the team, because they're not really one position where you say, hey, this guy is this guy, and this is where he's going to play. So, you have to figure out, do you have a spot for that guy, which is why the special teams element. I mean, don't forget, guys, now all of a sudden kickoff returns have become a big deal again in the league. So that is, you don't want to lose games because of that.
Yeah, the story too is, if you're doing 5 different things, you're the last guy at the position group. You're the last wide receiver on the roster.
Correct.
You're the kick returner. You're the punt returner. You never see any down and distance snaps unless you're covering a punt or on the punt return team. So your role is limited just because of the roster spot you've take.
I mean, Does this come down? And so, I mean, again, we still have more training camp and 2 preseason games to go, so we don't want to prejudge. But do you see it as potentially coming down to between Shenault and Shavers?
If they only keep 6 receivers, yes.
Well, they've got Brandon Codrington as a return guy that he was very good last year, but Shenault is big, and he'll break tackles.
Yep.
Codrington won't. And a bigger guy a lot of times equals durability as well. And if you're getting more kickoff returns, Codrington is more at risk, maybe not as available. But this is all conjecture. You don't know. I mean, Codrington may line up 20 weeks and never miss a rep.
Yeah, it's one of the more interesting questions when they get down to roster numbers and have to make it fit. And are you going to rob from Peter to pay Paul at one position to carry an extra guy at another position? There are going to be some very hard decisions. I think there's going to be a lot of roster gymnastics by this coaching staff because there's a lot of people that can play in this league that are not going to be on this roster.
I got a question for you. Who's Keontae Jenkins? He showed up on film in this game.
Yeah.
We were talking about him today watching practice.
Yeah, nice player. Undrafted rookie out of Virginia Tech, and he's impressed, and he's leapfrogged a couple of people on the depth chart, including last year's 6th-round pick Eddie Ulofoshio. But Shaq Thompson's been out with a hamstring injury. Bernard was just getting back from a hamstring injury. They didn't want to play him in the game, and he took advantage of that. He's been noticeable. There was a practice last week where he had an interception and a pass breakup in the same practice. So he has flashed.
No, and in the game, I thought he flashed in a good way. In other words, he is athletic. He's got burst, but I thought he played with discipline in the run game, and that's what really stood out to me. You know, there was one play in particular, it might have been early in the 3rd quarter, where I thought he really played with excellent discipline, ended up making the tackle. He was very controlled. He's long, he's lean. Look, we know when everybody's healthy, Bernard Milano will be the linebackers. Then it's a matter of who are the backup linebackers.
Right. And Dorian Williams is just getting back from injury, too. So he's taking advantage of the extra reps that he's gotten. Let's go to the other linebacker, though, because last year at this time, Joe Andreessen put on a performance in a preseason game against Pittsburgh and essentially made the roster with that 12-tackle effort. He's now running as the backup Mike to Terrell Bernard, and it looks like that's going to be his job when we get to the regular season outside of his duties on special teams. What can you say just about his instincts when defending the run? Because he seems to trigger, and he is downhill fast.
Yeah, that's his game. I mean, he's not a pass coverage player. You know, he's not big, but he plays with physicality. He plays with toughness. He attacks downhill. For a smaller guy, he takes on blocks. He stacks and sheds. You know, he sees things quickly, triggers the right word. He had that well-timed run through, shooting the gap late in the 2nd quarter. You know, that's the kind of player he is. Now, it's a small sample, and I can't sit here and say I've studied him, you know, in detail in the past, because I have not. So I'm not going to pretend that I have. But it just struck me watching him that doesn't have great awareness as a coverage player. But I don't think that's the way they would see him anyway. Even if he did, let's say Bernard had to miss some regular season games, and they felt like Andreessen was the guy. My guess is he wouldn't play on 3rd down. I don't think they see him that way, and that's not the strength of who he is.
I'm going to ask you to make a big assumption here and then answer this question. Assuming that Joey Bosa stays completely healthy throughout the season, regular season and postseason, how big a difference would he make to this Bills defense?
Well, personally, I would not play him as a regular player. I wouldn't play him 50, 60 snaps a game. I would play him predominantly, not 100%, but predominantly in pure pass type situations, because he does have unfortunately a strong history of injury. And the last thing you want, because he's so gifted and so talented as a pass rusher, that you want him to be able to play in those situations. All 3 of us know that last year, the down 4 as a pass rushing unit did not do what this coaching staff wanted to get done on a weekly basis. So you bring him in to rush the quarterback. So to me, I think he's a 20 to 25 snap a week player. Maybe fans listening will say, "Oh my God, that's crazy." But you want availability. You want him on the field for 17 games. We're not trying to prove a point here. They have a lot of defensive ends. They drafted one in Landon Jackson. They've got a bunch of guys to play defensive end. I would not overuse Joey Bosa.
Run defense was a little bit of an issue last year for this football team, and it was one of the contributors to their struggles on third down last year defensively. What did you see from how the run defense looked, taking into account that, we're probably got no game planning going on here?
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, more than likely it's going to be the same guys playing, Brownie. So it's just a matter of, and unless you're going to start playing with your scheme a little bit, in the past, this team has been predominantly an over-front defensive line, which means it's shifted to the strong side of the offensive formation. Unless they're going to start making conceptual changes, tactical changes, it comes down to the people. Obviously, I assume Oliver and Jones would still be the starting D tackles, correct?
It's looking that way at this point in time.
Yeah, I mean, Oliver for sure. I mean, he's, so, you've got to, those guys have to win on the inside. I think, keep one thing in mind. I think Bernard and Milano are really good football players, but they're not big by linebacker standards. Now, you have to decide, if you're playing a running team and it's 1st and 10, and you line up and you want to stop the run. And I think the staff probably has to think this through. Maybe they've decided already. Are those your linebackers in those situations? Now, I'm not suggesting they shouldn't play at all. I don't want people to think that. But I mean, you're dealing with Bernard. What is he? Maybe 225. And Milano, he was a safety really in college. And I love Milano.
Yeah. Historically, the Bills have just put a third linebacker on the field and played base.
Right.
What I want to ask you, because we keep hearing rumblings about this, in light of the advance of the run game last year league-wide, where more teams were drifting, away from 60% pass and were more 55-45. And the Bills were 51% run, 49% pass last year, and there were other teams in the general vicinity of that. Do you think we're going to keep drifting in that direction, and we're going to see more 12 personnel and maybe less 11 personnel and more running of the football?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I don't know if there's a specific, look, I'm not going to sit here and say, I have the answer, to that question, but clearly there was more running in the league a year ago. More and more 12 personnel. I mean, that's one thing we've seen more and more of the last couple of years. A lot of teams have played a ton more 12 personnel percentage-wise. So if you get more running, look, I mean, obviously they beat them in the playoffs, but they open with Baltimore. You still have Derrick Henry. I mean, Lamar presents a whole different factor, that separates them from just a normal running team. But, you're going to play teams that run the ball, and you're going to have to line up. And, you can talk about playing gaps and doing all the right things with discipline, and obviously that's what you want to do. But linebackers have to stack and shed. Linebackers have to play with physicality. They've got to play downhill. They've got to use their arms and hands, and they've got to play off blocks. You can't just run through, or you can't avoid, and defensive linemen have to control gaps or win in their gaps. I mean, that's at some point it comes down to that. So the bottom line is, that's what you have to be able to do to stop the running game. Are there times that schematically you can do some things? Yes, but it's also mono against mono at times as well.
Last one for me, Greg. James Cook's been a story here in Buffalo because of his contract, and I know we're not getting into any of that stuff with you. What I'm asking you this is, are the Bills good enough without him? If the worst happens for Bills fans and James Cook holds out, doesn't play, yada, yada, all that, is Ty Johnson, Ray Davis, Darrington Evans, are those guys going to be good enough without James Cook? How big a hole would he leave?
Pretty big one, because he's a big play guy, Steve. I mean, I think you can run the ball. I really like Ray Davis. And I think if he were a quote-unquote feature back in the context of the Bills, I mean, the Bills' offenses, and I know the numbers were such, as you said, Brownie, but I don't think that the Bills' offense is built on giving it to one guy 320 times, even though they run the ball a lot. I really like Davis, but they lose the explosive element. I mean, how many times Was it against Miami? I'm trying to remember. Wasn't there that play where they got the ball and then he ran 49 yards for a touchdown on the first
Yes.
play after
yeah,
he'd return over?
The same thing
loss of
happened.
down?
And the same thing happened in the San Francisco Snow game. They got the ball back after a
Yeah.
score, and he snapped off a 65-yarder one
He
play.
had 4
Yeah.
touchdowns over 40 yards last year.
Yeah, that's what you lose. I mean, and I think that that's a critical piece. I mean, when you have a back that can do that, I think that changes the calculus for not only for your offense but for defenses as well. You know that, Steve. I mean, you played with one. I mean, when that guy can go 50, 60 yards for a touchdown, it changes the game.
Yeah.
Greg, thanks as always. Good to have you back with us. We look forward to our future conversations this season.
Thanks, guys. Great to be back. Love being with you guys.
Thanks,
All right,
Greg.
that's senior producer from NFL Films, Greg Cosell, joining us.